Hi everyone, it's been a while. Welcome back to my channel. My name's Jessie. If you're new here, which you might be because it's been a while, I haven't filmed a video since the beginning of November of last year, and I originally was not planning on taking this long of a break from BookTube. I had, of course, some holiday travel plans that I knew was going to cause a slowdown in the number of uploads I was able to get out at the end of the year, but I was fully expecting to do all of the end of the year style videos in December, and I just decided not to. So if you're not interested in the personal life update, I will have a timestamp down below where you can skip and we'll go through all of the books that I did read during my BookTube break. So if you're just interested in the book thoughts, you can definitely skip ahead. I will completely understand. But if you're curious as to where I've been, here's that little update. So I was not planning on taking a break from BookTube, and when Thanksgiving was going by, back in November, I knew I wasn't going to be uploading any videos during then or filming any videos. And then when I got back from Thanksgiving, it was getting into the Christmas mindset, getting everything ready around the house, decorating, doing Christmassy activities with the kids. And again, I was fully expecting to upload some videos in December, but I actually, when I had taken that break during Thanksgiving, I'd felt a sense of relief, which was not quite expected, where I didn't feel like I had to be reading every second of the day during free time that I did have. My free time since having my second baby back in May of this past year has really dwindled, of course. Having 2 kids under the age of 3 now, it's just a lot. And then going back full-time to a job starting in November was a lot. That transition back into work, it was just a lot to handle, and my free time was just so limited. And the fact that when I was taking that break from BookTube, I didn't feel this kind of pressure to just be reading every second I got. When I was uploading BookTube videos, if I wasn't reading during my free time, I was feeling guilty. I was feeling like I wasn't being productive with my time. And that wasn't a great feeling because reading has always just been a fun hobby, a way to relax for me. And it kind of becomes something a little bit different when I was really in my full BookTube kind of phase last year of really trying to push out a lot of videos a week and really trying to be as active as I could be. So it was definitely taking a toll, I think, on how I was feeling about reading, and my enjoyment of what I was reading, I think, was kind of dwindling a little bit because I did feel kind of an obligation to be reading some of the books I was reading. And I think that affected, my reading mood and how much I wanted to pick up books. And I really just, at the end of last year, did not want to read. So I think taking the BookTube break, it made me feel a sense of relief. Like I didn't have to be reading. I didn't have to be producing content during the limited free time that I did have. And it was really nice. I wasn't expecting to feel that way. I didn't know it had kind of been built up in my head like that, where I was feeling that type of pressure until I took a break from it and realized kind of what a relief I was feeling during that break. So it kind of just started to extend my break more and more. And then every time I tried to think about getting in the mindset of filming a video again, I just felt like I didn't want to do it. And so I did not know again that I was going to be taking a break, but I think now I've just had a sense of longing for being back around the community. I have loved the community of people that I've kind of built here on my channel, and getting to interact with people in the comments and on my Patreon that I've now since discontinued because I just was feeling like I couldn't provide all of the things that I originally wanted to on that Patreon. So that's no longer happening at the moment. Maybe in the future my Patreon will come back. But long story short, I feel like I'm back in the mindset of wanting to return to BookTube, and this break has kind of showed me what I want my channel to look like, at least for the next several months or however long I feel this way. And so if you're interested in kind of a channel update, what to expect from my channel moving forward, here's kind of what I'm feeling right now. I'm first planning on making my videos feel a little bit more casual and informal. I want to cut down on the amount of editing that my videos need. So as you can see, probably from this video, they might be a little bit rambly, they might be a little bit repetitive with some of my thoughts, because I'm not going to be quite as polished or quite as edit heavy. I'm really going to be kind of just giving you my train of thought, like real time, as if I'm talking to you like I'd be talking to a friend. So it's going to be a little bit more of my unedited thoughts to kind of make the burden of editing a little bit easier, since that was such a time suck. I spent a lot of time editing my videos before my break happened, and I wanted to cut down on that. So that's kind of the first thing to expect, is maybe some kind of rambly thoughts, but hopefully it feels like I'm just talking to a friend, because that's what you all are. You're just my friends on the BookTube community. The other thing is the lack of TBRs. I will no longer be kind of doing any sort of formalized TBRs. I might talk to you about some things I plan on reading upcoming or things I'm prioritizing, but in terms of a formalized TBR, like here's what I'm reading next, and next after that, I'm not going to be doing that anymore. It just kind of made me feel too much pressure to focus on just those books, and I really want to allow myself to mood read whatever I want. And that being said, I'm also going to be just accepting far less books for review, because again, that sense of obligation, I think last year was detracting from my enjoyment of what I was reading. So just kind of really focusing in on only the highest of priority books. If I happen to get offered them for review, then maybe you'll see a couple of books like that on my channel, but really not accepting many books for review at all moving forward, just so I don't feel that sense of obligation and it doesn't affect my enjoyment of reading said book. The other thing is really just focusing on reading what I want to read, not feeling any sort of pressure from what other people are reading or from the community on, reading the most hyped books or popular books right now. I have so many books on my physical TBR on my shelves that I haven't read yet, and I'm really this year focused on not buying more books and adding to that physical TBR. I really want to read down what I have on my shelf. And there's so many books on my shelf that I'm so excited to read. Backlist books, not just popular books, some self-published books, some highly popular books, like a bunch of different books I'm very excited about, but that I feel like I've had to continue to put on the back burner because I'm wanting to read whatever's most popular, whatever's most trendy, or kind of stay up to date with, what's a part of the conversation in the fantasy community, or whatever the case may be. So just not feeling any sort of pressure to pick up certain books. So really that's what you're gonna see from my channel moving forward. The last thing is not having a set schedule for uploads. Prior to my break, I was uploading 3 videos a week, and then it was 2, and then I think at one point I got down to like 1 video a week. It just kind of kept dwindling as my free time dwindled. But I'm not going to put any pressure on myself to say, hey, you need to upload 2 videos this week or 1 video this week. It's going to be whenever I finish a book and I have something to talk about. So I'm going to focus a lot more on maybe some standalone review videos, some series review videos, not caring that no one watches them. It's fine, who cares? I really don't care about the views. I really just, if I have something to say about the books that I'm reading, then I want to get on here and talk to you all about them. So again, when I was uploading so many videos a week, I was feeling like I had to come up with video ideas. And a lot of those video ideas, looking back, feel like kind of filler content where I was just pushing out videos as much as I could, but I really want to focus on if I have something that I really want to say about some books. So I'll do some recent reads wrap-ups, of course. I always want to mention every book I'm reading and at least high level what my thoughts are, but again, more review videos about a single book or about a single series. That's what you can expect to see. And so a lot less like list videos, a lot less kind of TBR type videos or those types of things. And really, I've tried vlogs. I wish I was good at vlogs, but I think in this season of my life, when everything kind of outside of my reading time is kind of just consumed with my family time and kid time, it really just doesn't make sense for me to vlog, especially since I don't want to show my kids on camera, just for personal privacy reasons. It just doesn't make much sense to do vlog style videos at this time for me. So it's really going to be mostly recent reads wrap-ups, review videos, sharing with you all books I'm loving, books I'm not so much loving, and getting your thoughts on them as well. So that is my channel update. That is my personal update. It's really just bottom line, I was feeling just a lot of pressure, and it was putting kind of this burden on me that I really didn't even see until I took a break from it. But now I don't feel that way, and I'm ready to come back, and I'm excited to come back, but in a slightly different way than I was on BookTube before. So all that being said, now let's talk about the books that I did read during my little break from BookTube. And I do have quite a few. I have been reading. I definitely am still loving reading as a hobby. I try to wake up early every morning before the rest of my family wakes up to have some time to read each day. So I've been reading. I just haven't been inspired to create videos until now. So the first book that I read, I'm just going to go in chronological order from where I last left off. And I think that the last book I had talked about on my channel was How to Sell a Haunted House, which I loved. But the book I finished after that I haven't yet talked about was Grievar's Blood by Alexander Darwin, which is the sequel to The Combat Codes. And I was sent this book for review, and last year when I read The Combat Codes, I was blown away. It was a complete surprise how much I absolutely loved that book. I loved the action, I loved the characters, I loved the unique world building. And Grievar's Blood, I still had a really, really good time with. It was a while since I finished it, so there's quite a lot that I don't remember like super specifically, but I do remember still really, really enjoying the characters. Seago is definitely my favorite. I still remember really enjoying the world, and again, the action scenes are just so beautifully written and choreographed. I love all of that. But I will say, I think Grievar's Blood I enjoyed slightly less than The Combat Codes, only because you're focusing more on some of the side characters from the first book. They kind of get their own perspectives and get a lot more focus in Grievar's Blood, and I just didn't love those characters as much as the core characters from book 1. And I wanted more of Seago. I wanted more of what we were getting from the perspectives in book 1. So there was just a little bit of added perspective and focus that kind of took away from what the focus that I loved in book 1. But by the end of the book, it all made sense as to why we were focusing on some of the other characters a little bit more. And the ending of Grievar's Blood was fantastic. So it had some pacing issues for me in the middle where it did drag a little bit, again, because of those additional perspectives that I just wasn't quite as invested in. But the end of the book was stellar. It was so good, had me so excited to continue on in the series. So Grievar's Blood for me was a 4-star. Combat Codes was a 5-star. So again, my enjoyment not quite as high as book 1, but still very excited to see where the story goes. And I do believe this is just a trilogy, and I think the 3rd book we are getting this year, since this was originally a self-published series that was picked up by Orbit. So the 3rd book technically was already released as the self-published version, so we're just waiting on Orbit to release their version of book 3, which I think is going to be this year. Actually, let me check it really quick and see if there's a release date for it yet, because I am really, really excited for it. Oh, I haven't seen the cover yet. The cover is amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's so cool. Oh no, it's not being released until December 1st of this year. I might have to reread the books before the 3rd one comes out then. Well, regardless, I'm still really enjoying the series. Can't wait for book 3. So moving on to the next book that I finished, which was for my book club on my Patreon that I had last year, and it was Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. I was really excited to read this one. It's very small, and I remember hearing great things about it from Elliot Brooks, who seemed to really, really enjoy it and kind of compared it to The Witcher if you were more focused on Geralt and Ciri's relationship, and I agree with that kind of comparison. So Godkiller, doing these without editing is going to be interesting, doing book summaries. Godkiller follows a girl who is wronged by a god and makes it her life mission to kill gods in a world where gods are kind of manifested if people gather to worship them. So she is hell-bent on revenge and killing all the gods in this world. And she comes upon a girl who is burdened, let's say, with a god of her own. And in order to save this girl, she cannot kill the god that is burdening this girl, because if she kills the god, then she kills the girl. So the god killer is trying to figure out a way to save this girl from her god and separate her from the god. And so you're following kind of the god killer's perspective, which is Cixin, and then you're following the girl's perspective, and then you're following the god's perspective, who is attached to the girl. There might be one more perspective I'm forgetting. It's been a while. So I really, really enjoyed this book. First of all, I loved the world building, the idea of how gods manifest and the different things the gods can do. It was so interesting. I loved the lore of this world so much, and exploring all of the different ways the gods behave and are created and exist within this world. Super cool. Love that kind of stuff. The other thing was I loved the characters. I loved pretty much all of them equally. I thought that they were all fantastic and very distinct from each other. So even though it was a multi-perspective book, there wasn't one perspective that I disliked or felt uninterested in. All of the perspectives I was just as interested in, and I loved how distinct each character felt. I really liked Skedi, the god, as well. It had really interesting themes it was exploring, because the god that is afflicting the young girl is a god of white lies, and so kind of the themes around truth and is a white lie cruel or is it kind, and these kinds of things that were explored were really interesting. And I just really, really enjoyed how well paced this book was. It really hooked you right from the beginning. The first chapter was incredible, had me so interested right away, and it really never let up for me. I never felt like there was a lull in the story, and even though it was so short, it packed such a big punch. So I'm very, very excited to continue on with this story. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I thought it was just fantastic. So very excited for Sunbringer. That was one of the few books that I ended up pre-ordering this year. And I'm excited to get my copy so that I can dive right in, because this was fantastic. I can totally understand why it had the hype surrounding it, because it just was really, really well done. I'm very surprised. I think this was a debut, and it was just an excellent debut. So very excited to check out whatever else this author is going to write. Next book I finished was The Shadow of the Gods by Gwynne. This is another one I read for my Patreon book club last year, and this one was a big surprise, not in a good way. So I love The Faithful and the Fallen by Gwynne, one of my favorite series of all time. So was fully expecting to go into The Shadow of the Gods and absolutely love it, because I'd heard amazing things. I really hadn't heard any negative things about this book. But for me, I did not end up enjoying this one pretty much at all. It was just so Viking heavy. And I can't even summarize it, because it's one of those epic fantasy stories that just has like several different plot lines going on. And but it's Viking fantasy. And this was kind of the first book I'd read that I would classify as Viking fantasy. I really hadn't read anything like that before. And I think I've learned something about myself as a reader, which is that I don't like Viking fantasy. Gwynne is very, very knowledgeable about Vikings and everything surrounding Vikings. He's very knowledgeable, and he is not afraid to show you how knowledgeable he is about it, because there was so much description about clothes, weapons, atmosphere, boats, like just so many descriptions that I just did not care about at all. And then the characters themselves, I never really felt anything for them. And I was very surprised, because I thought I would at least feel super invested in the mother of the story's perspective. And Orca is the mother character that we're following in this book. And it really just didn't explore the themes I was expecting it to with following a mother. So I ended up being very disappointed, because I felt like I was going to get something different than what I did from her perspective, which is fine. I mean, a lot of people really, really love Orca, so this could just be, my own opinion, and it is my own opinion. It's definitely not the correct opinion. You could definitely feel very differently, but I just never really cared about Orca, and I really didn't care about the other characters. So I was shocked that I did not end up enjoying this one. I gave it 2.5 stars. I won't be continuing on with the series, and yeah, this is like the biggest surprise for me, because I just love Gwynne's other series so much. So even though I don't love this series, I'm still planning on reading the trilogy of books that comes after The Faithful and the Fallen in that same world, and I'm expecting to enjoy those a lot more, because I love his world building in The Faithful and the Fallen. I think it's just that I just don't care about Vikings. And maybe that's the whole reason I didn't enjoy that one. So that's The Shadow of the Gods. And then I read Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. And I really, really enjoyed Hogfather. This was the book that made me start with the Death Collection in Discworld, because I was so excited to get to Hogfather. So I read more, Reaper Man, DNF'd Soul Music, and then finally was so excited to read Hogfather, where you're following the character of Death in the Discworld, and he takes on the role of Santa Claus because Santa Claus goes missing. And I read it around Christmas time, so it was just the perfect time to read it. And I really, this was definitely my favorite Death Collection book. Loved the charm of it, loved seeing Death try to stumble his way through Santa Claus's role. I thought it was hilarious. A lot of times I, chuckled to myself while reading this book. I just loved Terry Pratchett's writing so much. And I just felt like the plot of this one felt a lot more cohesive, and it was much easier to follow than some of the other Death Collection books. And I went on to read Thief of Time by Terry Pratchett after this one, and I actually ended up DNFing that one because it went back to the problem I've had with some of the other Death Collection books, that there were like side plots going on outside of Death's kind of main storyline that I just was so confused by. And I honestly had no idea what was going on in Thief of Time. It was very hard for me to focus on it, very hard for me to care about what was going on. So Thief of Time and the entire Death Collection, I would say, like, I didn't love it, but Hogfather and Mort were definitely my favorites in the Death Collection. And I think you can skip around and you don't have to read all of the books in the collection to appreciate them. You can just skip to Hogfather and still get a lot out of it. You can just read Mort and still get a lot out of it. Like, you don't have to read this entire series in order to understand what's going on. So if I had known that, I think in hindsight, I would have just picked up Mort and Hogfather and been done with the Death Collection and moved on to something else. But the completionist in me wanted to finish the Death Collection before moving on to anything else in the Discworld. So now that I've DNF'd Thief of Time, I'll probably move on to Guards, and I forget what that collection of stories is called in Discworld, but whatever that one's called, that will be what I try next in Discworld, but it probably won't be for a while because I have a lot of other books that I want to get to first. But yes, I'm very excited to have finally read Hogfather. It was delightful, perfect read for Christmas, and I'm glad to say, even though I didn't finish the Death Collection, I'm done with it and can move on. And then the last book I read last year was A Christmas Carol, which again I picked up around Christmas time. I had never read it before. Of course, I know the story. I actually acted it in a play as kind of a parody on A Christmas Carol as Tiny Tim. So I've definitely been very familiar with the story for a long time now, but I just never read the book, and I really, really enjoyed myself. I was expecting to kind of go in and be, you know, bogged down with that more classical style language. I had never read Charles Dickens before, so I just didn't know what to expect of the writing style, and I actually really, really enjoyed the writing style. I didn't find it hard to follow at all. I really enjoyed the pacing of this one. It was a short and sweet read. The adaptations I've seen actually follow the book pretty closely, and I just think it has a fantastic message, and it's such a classic for a reason. I really, really am glad I finally read the book. It's hard to rate that one because it's just iconic. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars because, yeah, I did. Because it's just something where classics for me are always a little bit harder to feel fully invested in because of the language. But I still really, really appreciated it and enjoyed it, and think it's one that if you are interested in reading, you should definitely pick up. I think it's not one of those very dense and hard to kind of follow classics. So that was my last read of 2024, or 2023. Geez, we're in 2024 now. But moving into 2024 now, I'll start with a couple DNFs. I already talked about Thief of Time being a DNF, but I also DNF'd The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. Again, another surprise because I enjoyed The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, and I'd heard that the second book especially was just incredible, life-changing, some people say it completely shifts their entire view on space and humanity, and it's like this groundbreaking book, and I'm so bummed because I love the concepts in this series. In The Three-Body Problem, the concepts and what it's saying is so cool, and The Dark Forest, it started that same way where I was really enjoying the ideas in this book, but it's the execution and the writing style that just doesn't work for me. In The Three-Body Problem, I was able to kind of get to a point in that story where it made enough sense and I could understand what was going on, even though a lot of it went over my head. I still overall could kind of grasp what was going on. But then reading The Dark Forest, I think it's just the writing style and the way it hops between perspectives. It's just very jarring. It's a very dry writing style, very to the point. And sometimes I like that, but there was something about this style that just didn't work for me. And it shifts perspective so quickly and kind of in an unannounced way that was very hard to follow. And it was just hard to tell who was who and what we were doing. And I just had such a hard time following the story that I kind of started to zone out, and it was so hard to focus on this book. I am excited that this is getting an adaptation, because I think maybe if in a visual format, this story will work really well and I'll be able to kind of appreciate it a lot more. And again, I love the ideas that are being presented here. I just don't love the way it's executed. So yeah, I did end up DNFing The Dark Forest. I know some people are probably going to be like, oh my God, you missed so much. And I know, like, I've heard the reviews and seen the glowing, comments about it. But yeah, it just, for some reason, was not connecting at all with me. But let's talk about the books that I did finish this year so far. The first being The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This was my first read of the year and my absolute favorite of the series. That is the conclusion to the David trilogy. I enjoyed City of Brass and Kingdom of Copper. I gave each of those books 4 stars. And this last book, Empire of Gold, I gave 5 glowing stars. I loved every second of it. I just thought it was such an amazing conclusion to this trilogy. I loved the pacing, the characters, what was going on, like the plot, the action. It was all just fantastic. Knocked it out of the park. I'm probably going to do a whole series review on this series to talk a little bit more about it because I do have so much to say about it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just know that I absolutely loved it, gave it 5 stars. Looking back, it may even kind of elevate the entire series for me. I don't know yet if it would make like a top 10, but it's close. Like, that's how good this conclusion was. So I'll have a full series review for this one at some point, but so good. I loved it. Then the next one I finished was The Poison Song by Jen Williams. As you can see, I was on a series kick where I was really trying to close out and continue on with series, and finished the Winnowing Flame trilogy. This is interesting because it was a similar reading experience I had with David, where the first 2 books, Ninth Reign and Bitter Twins, were both 4 stars. I enjoyed them. There were some things that weren't my favorite, but overall still really enjoyed. And this last book, unlike Empire of Gold, which for me knocked it out of the park, this last book actually was the weakest for me, and it ended up being 3 stars. And this is one that I was, again, a little bit more surprised by because I had really enjoyed the first 2 books, but I think what happened was where David got me more and more and more invested in the characters, the opposite happened with Winnowing Flame, where I became less and less and less invested in the characters. I started out loving them. I actually loved the characters more in Ninth Reign than I did in City of Brass, but my love for them kind of kept dwindling through the series and through some of the plot and choices that were made with those characters. So I was a little disappointed when The Poison Song ended up being just a 3 for me. There was a lot of that book that dragged for me. The ending itself was fantastic, but the middle portion of this book was such a drag and was just so tedious for me to get through that it really kind of hindered my enjoyment and made this one the weakest for me in the series. Again, which I was surprised by. So there were some things I really, really liked about this series, but overall, I'm glad I read it, but it's not going to be a favorite series for me, unfortunately. So yeah, that was kind of a bummer. But the last part of this book was so good. Like, the way it finally wrapped up was really, really good. So I do have to give it some credit for that. And then finally, I read Jade War by Fonda Lee. continued on in the Greenbone saga finally. So I had reread Jade City last year, towards the end of the year, and really enjoyed it. 4 stars, and just was so impressed with the politics of the series, how well realized the world was, and Jade War, oh gosh, it's not even that it's super action-packed or that there's like crazy thing after crazy thing happening. It was just so well written and so well realized that I was just in awe of it the whole time I was reading it. The politics of this world and the sophistication with which those politics are handled, like it has such a level of sophistication that I just don't see from a ton of other fantasy books. And I again was just in awe of it. If you like Peaky Blinders, this is like the fantasy version, a fantasy urban version, more modern version of Peaky Blinders. It's so good and dark and gritty and just juicy, and the ending of this one just knocked it out of the park. And I loved the character growth so much, where we see these characters start at the beginning of book 1 and kind of where they end up at the end of book 2 is crazy. It's amazing character arcs without them feeling disingenuous, like different characters. Like they've grown so much, they've changed so much, but it's within their characters. And that's so impressive for them to feel so different than where they started, but still feel consistent with who they are. Incredible character work, incredible plotting and world building. Just again, in awe of it. So 5 stars for that one. And I actually am now reading Jade Legacy because I just had to dive right in. I couldn't wait. So Jade Legacy will probably take me a while, but this is another one that when I finish Jade Legacy, I will probably do a full series review on it because I just will have so much to say. So yeah, I've read some really, really good books so far this year. And as you can tell, what I'm prioritizing right at the beginning of the year is series. So I want to finish Jade Legacy. I want to continue on in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy by Richard Swan with Tyranny of Faith, and finish that one out with, what's it called? Trials of the Empire, something like that. I want to finish that one out and then continue to kind of work through some series that I'd started and just hadn't finished. That is my priority for the beginning of this year. So this was a long video. Those are all my updates. Those are all my recently read books. What are your thoughts? What are some recently read books that you've read, and what did you think of them? What's your favorite book of the year so far? Let me know in the comments down below. I've missed you all. Thank you for being here and bearing with me while I was on my break. I really appreciate it. And I will chat with you all in my next video. Bye, everyone.